Raiders Bengals is the next game that I want to get to here. Two teams that really need a win. There's no doubt about it. I think the Bengals felt like they were really rolling, and then the Eagles really took it to them last week at home. The Raiders are obviously a team that they've been up and down. I thought they played well last week against Kansas City Chiefs. They seem to play the Chiefs really well. They
Yeah.
if they could just pretend that a team is the Chiefs every single week, I think that they might have a little bit more wins this season because
Maybe
this
they
is
need a
not a
puppet for every team.
it's not like a talentless football team here with the Raiders. It just, I don't know. It just has not really been able to come together enough throughout the NFL season. But there's a lot to talk about here in this one. What's the matchup that matters with the Raiders traveling to Cincinnati here?
It's a pretty obvious and probably simplistic one, but it's Max Crosby against Marius Mims. Given the fact that Max Crosby is the guy that's capable of wreaking havoc on this Bengals offensive line, which hasn't done super well for Joe Burrow this season so far. A 64.1 pass blocking grade, which ranks 21st in the league. Overall, 59.0 PFF grade, which is 28th in the league. And they haven't really allowed for this offense to be multidimensional in Cincinnati because they cannot figure out how to run the ball successfully. And that's partially due, again, to the offensive line having a 52.1 PFF run blocking grade, which ranks 31st. So that's something that I look at and I'm like, all right, well, you've got a guy like Max Crosby who can affect the quarterback so incredibly much. He's an absolute game wrecker. 78.8 PFF grade this season, which is 15th. And that's not even like kind of the gaudy numbers that we're even used to seeing, but that's really because Max Crosby is kind of doing this on his own for that Ravens defense or the Raiders defensive line right now. I just think that that's going to be how Amarius Mims holds up. He's been in and out of injury, fighting through certain things, and so far, like how healthy is he really, and can he stand up to Max Crosby? Is my matchup that's going to matter most, I think, for Joey B and the Bengals.
It's who wins the rushing battle, and you touched on that a little bit with what you were talking about there, but. Total rushing yards this season. The Raiders, 31st in the NFL. The Bengals, 27th. Rushes of 10 or more yards this year. Raiders, 28th. Bengals, 22nd. First downs gained while rushing this season. Raiders, dead last. Bengals, 28th. I mean, it's just two of the most inefficient run games that we have in the NFL. And I feel as though, look, if we're looking at this game objectively, we get T. Higgins back in this game. I don't know if the Raiders are going to be able to keep up on the scoreboard.
Right.
But I think that even if the Bengals win this football game, you need to see them run the ball better. And that's why, like, this is a matchup that matters for me, not just to win this football game, but moving forward for the Bengals. Joe Burrow came out in the media and he said, we've got to win 7 of our next 9 games. He's like, that's doable. And it is doable,
for sure.
But it's not doable if you're as one-dimensional as the Bengals are right now. And it feels like too often their rushing attack is not enough a part of this offense that it needs to be. They're leaning way too much in the passing game. And I get it. Joe Burrow's playing fantastic. The receivers are great. You want to lean into that and let that be the strength or your bread and butter of how you create your offensive attack. But it's just got to be way better in the run game. And so this is an area where even if the Bengals win this football game, if they cannot run the ball better, I'm not going to feel great about this team moving forward because the mountain ahead of them is steep and they have to have such a low margin for error moving forward. And then the plus factor to me, obviously, like Brock Bowers is a really big plus factor for this team. You mentioned Max Crosby, some of the other guys on the defense side of the ball as well. I think Robert Spillane is playing really well. He's got to play better in coverage, but he's really good at defending the run. I think just overall the linebackers are good at defending the run there for the Raiders. But ultimately, I've just got to pick the easy one. It's Minshew, right? Look at the 2 games that the Raiders were the most competitive. Minshew scored a passing grade above 70. They don't have the offensive identity to have Minshew not play well and then go, well, it's all right. Our run game picked us up. I just mentioned some of the stats there. Alexander Mattison had 15 rushing yards on 14 carries last week. If Minshew does not play well, the team does not have a chance on the scoreboard. And that's just the way that it is. I hate sometimes bringing up the obvious because we got a lot of different data points. We got a lot of different depth that we could talk about every single game. But at the end of the day, the 2 most competitive games, including that win against the Ravens, that the Raiders have had so far this season. It was that game against the Ravens, which they won, and the game that they just played against the Kansas City Chiefs, which they lost. That was the game in which they were the most competitive against teams that were actually tough teams. And it was just because Minshew played really good. And if he does not play at that level, I don't know what else they have. But what's your plus factor here?
Yeah, it goes back to what you were talking about with this rushing attack, and my plus factor is Chase Brown for the Cincinnati Bengals because I don't think it's a coincidence that the Bengals win when Brown averages over 4.5 yards a carry. And it's not as simplistic as saying, yeah, of course, like, if the running back is doing well, but it's just that another component that defenses then have to respect. And if you are being productive on the ground, if you're getting 4.5 yards a carry out of your running backs, then you're going to have to kind of, again, switch up how you're defending the Cincinnati Bengals and not sell out on defending Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and all those guys that Joe Burrow can get the ball to beautifully when they're healthy. Of course, getting T. Higgins back will be huge, but you touched on it before. You just can't be that one dimensional if you're the Cincinnati Bengals and expect this season to go well or beyond or up to the expectations. I think like I came into the season thinking that the Cincinnati Bengals were one of the heavyweights in the AFC. In order to be that, you need to give defenses a lot to think about, and you need to have a well-rounded offense, which the Cincinnati Bengals just do not. So Chase Brown, get him, feed him the ball, but then do all of the other things that make it easier on him. Help him out in the run blocking game if you're the offensive line. And then I would like to see a little bit more play action from Joe Burrow and trying just to kind of round this all out and make defenses respect the run and just be productive on the ground.